welcome to another episode of the Common Sense Professional. I'm your co-host, Marie Weiss, and I'm here with my co-host.
I am Chuck Ingram.
Nice to see you, Chuck. And today our guest is JC Quintana.
Yes.
And JC is on a mission to help companies build quality business relationships through strategy and technology. I can't think of a better mission. Thanks so much for being with us today, JC.
It's great to spend my few minutes, the hour with two of my favorite people. So thank you for having me.
Oh, we're excited, and I'm so excited to dig into this topic. You're an internationally recognized business relationship psychology researcher, and I love this topic. I love this topic for so many reasons. As a marketer, it's unfortunate. A lot of marketers always are trying to get into the head of the customer. We've talked a lot in previous shows about the buyer journey and the importance of that. So I'm going to open with the obvious question. I'm sorry. I'm going to lob you the softball. So what has changed in the last 24 months with respect to relationship building in the world we now find ourselves in?
Wow, I love that question. That's a good one to start. A hot, spicy question to throw at me. I love it. I'm ready. So, it's interesting to the question is interesting because if you think about the psychology of things, the reality is that the psychology of relationship development in the midst of the environment that we're in really hasn't changed. So I'll explain that. What I mean by that is that, there's a well-known theory of psychology, social exchange theory, which people kind of connect with empathy, and also equity theory, which people connect with value. And that hasn't changed, right? We haven't stopped being human beings. The bottom line is that anytime that people assess a relationship, they go through this cool calculation of rewards minus cost equals outcome. And, that means that every time that I look at a business, every time that I look at my relationship with my peers, employees, pandemic or no pandemic, remote or not remote, I'm always calculating that. And, in my sessions with customers, that's usually what I say. I say, how much is it costing your customers in terms of time, in terms of defining meaning, in terms of engagement, so that when they look at the value that you have and they deduct that cost from it, they still feel like there's a good outcome. What has changed, though, is that some of our delivery methods for doing some of those relational things has changed. And some of the traditional things that we've created, especially technology around, things that we've gotten used to, methods, social norms have changed. And so, people are calculating that relationship value differently because people are working from home and there were salespeople who were used to being face-to-face, or customers expected things to be delivered to them by a certain time, and there's ships out in the ocean that are not able to deliver it. And we have to go back to that calculation, right? In the midst of all these relationship dynamics changing, how do we equitably go back to calculating what is costing us to get the rewards and the outcomes that we expect?
JC, doesn't it feel like, and part of what you said made me think of this, it feels like some of this has come full circle. It's like when I was a kid, I used to remember like standing in my grandpa's front seat of his car. So it was in the 60s. And we would go to a grocery store and they would have this box and we'd show up and they'd have his stuff sort of curated for him. And then I remember when I got into school and got bigger, my grandpa would stand outside of the grocery store, the supermarket, I'm doing air quotes, and sort of smoke cigarettes. He hated it. And does it feel like that we're kind of come back, but through different channels or whatever? Like you said, it's come back to sort of the older, the customer first thinking.
Yeah, so you Chuck, and you're right, by the way. And some of those old-fashioned, old-time supermarket things, I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm only 27 years old.
I know you're extremely young.
And so no, definitely not, right? I'm right up there with you, and you're right. I think a couple of things that stand out from your comment is, yes, you're right. we didn't have technology to take the place of the things that we do to build relationships, right? And what I mean by that is that, we perceive value based on how much it costs us to build that relationship. Over the years, we've told companies, and we meaning people in the technology space, we've told people it costs too much money to make a phone call. So as much as you can, divert any incoming call center call, divert it to chat, divert it to email, right? Because it costs us less to do that. As people got locked in place and needed more human connection, that model fell apart, because to renegotiate a relationship in the midst of changing needs, characteristics, circumstances, and capacity, right? Which is the N3C of psychology, those four things that people need to negotiate and understand the value of a relationship. We had all these channels in place that made things cheaper for us and better for us. And you're right. Now people are like, wait a minute. You're right. If we are going to renegotiate a contract or a price, or if you're going to have to call a customer and say, please don't leave, but it's going to be 6 weeks later. By the time you get your product, then all of a sudden we went, wow, all those things don't work. We gotta be face-to-face virtually with people. We gotta be able to be relational. We gotta go back to that, rewards minus cost equals outcome calculation together, so that it's equitable for both parties.
I think one thing that a lot of businesses are really struggling with right now, and Chuck, I know you see this, quite a bit with what goes on with your customers, and we see it across the board, is that there's always the next hot tool. There's always the next new thing. There's always the bright, shiny object that people are going to chase, especially entrepreneurs and business people, as they're trying to figure out, probably the fastest, cheapest way to get to the end goal, right? And I think what you're saying, which I love, is that relationships and relationship building has never really changed. But when we start to add shortcuts and then the environment changes, that's when it really comes back to bite us in the butt, quite frankly. That if we really don't know how to build, and I've seen this in a lot of early stage software companies who don't have a phone number or an address on their website. You can't call them. No matter how hard you dig into the website, there's no way to phone anybody and ask a question. Even if you attempt to use the chat, you can tell right away if it's an automated chat tool because of the way the answers come back. What would you tell people right now, right here, right now, after everything we've just come through over the last 2 years? What would you tell people are the most compelling things that they need to go back to right now? Forget everything else. Forget the shortcuts. What's the common sense approach right now to getting back on track?
Yeah, I love that question. So no surprise that it is about going back to basics, right? Things that you and I know about interpersonal relationships that are just as applicable and apply directly to our business relationships that we tend to think are separate, right? And it is in the midst of change, in the midst of emerging technologies that are showing people who you are, where you are, what you're doing, rising expectations. And I got to give Chuck credit for this, because Chuck's the one that's gotten me thinking about this. But we're in the middle of changes in expectations that are being driven by technology, almost subvertly, right? Almost to where right now I'm trying not to say the word Alexa or right? Because they are listening, right? And we have so many things in our personal life that we use to, be proactive, be effective, build interpersonal relationships that people expect implemented in their business world, right? But in the midst of those things, relationships don't change. So when you ask me, the best, most common sense advice is treat relationships like what they are. They're relationships. People bring them to the workplace. They bring them to the business setting. And the elements of transformation and deterioration based on the value people perceive and equity of both parties is just as applicable, which means that the best thing that you could ever do to make a relationship successful at work is to make sure that you're choosing the right relationship, just like you do in interpersonal relationships. And there are so many companies, and Chuck will relate to this from years working together. How many times we walked into a big, juicy, sexy logo account that we knew it was the wrong relationship. It was not a relationship of equity, but we wanted to be able to put that logo on our website and market it that we did business with that company. And we knew it was going to cost us money and that the relationship would eventually deteriorate based on the fact that we were paying more of the cost to get the reward. And then eventually the customer didn't see our value because they were getting a lot of reward for very little cost, right? So yes, relationships are the same in interpersonal and business relationships. So date the right businesses. See the value and equity of both parties so that it's equitable, right? And do all the things that I write a lot about, right? Define it well. Make sure you're mindful of who people are at the center, their culture, their differences. Make sure that the engagement channels you choose are the right ones and that you're creating value together, that there's accountability as much as knowledge, that there's transparency, then you set the right stage for the relationship to be successful, right? Those apply in interpersonal and business relationship. You can't separate it because you're human.
Yeah. So I have a question, JC. Awesome thoughts on relationships. You also wrote a book about CRM, and the middle word of CRM is relationships. I think I've seen you write, and I've talked about it from time to time, that people are buying a lot of CRM. It's not working out for them. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so this is fresh in my mind for a number of reasons. Number one, because the next edition of the book's about to come out at the end of the month, and I've been thinking a lot about it. I've had peers that have said, why are you writing a customer relationship management book? People hate that term. And I always come back and I say, what does the world need the most of right now? 3 things. A real focus on the right customers, a genuine focus on the relationship and relations with equity with those customers, and the ability to manage the right partnerships, activities that lead to a quality relationship with them. Well, I just accidentally used the words customer relationship management, right? So yes, right now, that's exactly what we need. But the problem, to your point, Chuck, is that yes, I think that we've completely changed what CRM means. We mean technology, right? We mean a platform. And that's not always the case. Sometimes to build a stronger quality relationship, you got to go back to the strategy of building a psychologically safe space for your customers to trust you, right? And for your employees to trust that you are going to do right by the customer. So many of the things that CRM drives is behavior, is business development. It is marketing to the right people and building a relationship with the right people. And yes, technology will enable that because we live in a technology-enabled world. We can't separate that, right? So I think that we've kind of fallen into what used to be the conversation of, oh, let's build relationships. Oh, look, here's a really cool tool that can help me do that. We can't separate that anymore, right? I can't think of a single industry where you are not going to end up using technology to enable relational things, right? So I think it's just more of a marriage of the two that is a lot more, connected, right? More congruent. See what I did there, Chuck? More congruent, right? And so, you can't separate technology from the strategy. That doesn't mean that CRM is no longer a strategy. It still is. It needs to be. It needs to come first, so that technology can enable the right things. Otherwise, you're going to end up, solving the wrong problems really well, because technology can do amazing things.
Do you want to align your marketing, sales, and service with IT for better business results? CongruentX has a proven formula to help you get CRM right in 30 days. Please visit congruentx.com and get congruent. CongruentX, people, technology, aligned.
I think your points there, and I just want to hammer this point home, because I'd love to hear the backup research you've done around it. I think too often we think technology is going to solve a problem when the real problem we should be solving is identifying the right people and the relationship they want with us. And so, even when software companies, as an example, we did a lot of work, probably 5 or 6 years ago with companies who wanted the offer on their homepage to be a free trial. If we can just get them into a free trial, they'll buy our software. Well, through a lot of research and extensive sort of psychology of what that means is the level of effort to have to figure something out and implement something, even if it's free, isn't worth it, right? Even if it's free, It doesn't matter. Saying you have a website, pointing people to the website, when you've had to close your doors during COVID or doing something like that, well, they can just go to the website and figure it out. Well, if they hit the website and none of the information was there that people wanted, that relationship is going to go south really, really fast. And even the small businesses in the last two years that I've seen doing a really good job are people who went back to the phones and called people they knew and just said, "How are you? What's happening in your business right now? How are things going?" And it wasn't like, well, let's start doing more email marketing. Let's start dodging people and tracking people on LinkedIn. It was back to the true sense of what did it truly mean to have a relationship with someone. And I have a theory, and I'd love to hear whether you believe this. I have a theory that any human being really at the end of the day cannot manage more than 100 relationships at a time. Even to go past 100 is a lot. We have a theory from a marketing perspective that if you have a 1,000-person mailing list of people you really know and you understand and you engage with versus a 50,000 list of unknown names and email addresses, your 1,000 is going to perform way better than the 50,000. It's not about volume, it's about quality, and it's about knowing what people need when they need it and how they want to communicate with you. So as you talk to people around the psychology of relationship building, and yes, technology can enable some of that, what are some of the things that you're telling people to get right out the door? It sounds, you've talked a little bit about find the right customers to build that relationship with. Spend time getting to know people before you ask for something. But what are some other things you've seen? And do you agree with this idea that as human beings, our capacity maxes out really fast?
Yeah, so you're dead on. There's some research that goes back 10 years that was done, and I may get the island wrong, but I think it was around the island of Sardinia, where researchers went out and started talking to people, and they couldn't understand why in collectivistic communities and in collectivistic cultures, for the most part, it is society at large that makes decisions together to move forward. But at this island, it wasn't the case. The level of empathy was really only directed at a very small group of people that was part of the almost immediate family or immediate tribe. And researchers, yes, that's exactly what they found, that not only do we extend empathy to the people closest to us, but when we have limitations, when we have restrictions, we tend to give that empathy a lot less to people outside of that circle because, for a lot of reasons, capacity, the idea of multitasking has been debunked for human beings for a long time. And yes, that is exactly right. And that itself, by the way, Marie, is really a great advice to give people, right? We cannot be all things to all people all the time. We think that that's what technology is for. We think that technology is so that we can be all things to all people all the time, and that's not true. That's not how people think, right? And so that in itself, I think, is really a great best practice, a great advice to be able to say, yes, choose the relationships with whom your value proposition aligns. That really is your sweet spot, right? And understand the channels and the channel expectations that people have and the relationship expectations that people have on how that value is going to be delivered. If you can agree and clarify what those expectations are, and then build technology that meets those expectations, then you're going to do a really good job, right? Because you are meeting expectations, no matter how ridiculous, by the way. I was talking to the then chief customer officer at United Stationery, and she was telling me about this woman called Mary, who was her best call center agent. And I said, well, what makes her the best call center agent? And she said, well, we sell toilet paper and we sell office supplies. So the people that are calling us, the people we have a relationship with, are rough and tough warehouse managers that are in the warehouse, probably smoking a cigar in the back, and probably somewhere between 54 and 64. They call on the phone, and when Marie picks up the phone, she knows who that person is, and she'll say, Tom, what's up? Because they have 5 minutes or less to be on that call. She doesn't go, hello, Marie. Thank you for joining us today. How can I be of great service to you today for eternity, forever, so you can be our friend, right? It's like this ridiculous script that we built, right? She got to the point because the expectation was set that the reason people call is to know where the toilet paper is, right? Where's the toilet paper right now? And that's how she handled it. Bob, did you check the back? No. Bob checks the back. There's the toilet paper. Okay, Marie. Thanks so much for the answer. Hang up, and then they get a nice fruit basket at the end of the month or something. Expectation setting is at the heart of relationship development, and yes, technology has to enable you to meet those expectations and constantly understand what those expectations are. And back to those four. Technology should also enable you, and strategy should also enable you to constantly evaluate changing needs, circumstances, characteristics, and capacity of the people you serve and of your own company.
Awesome. So I'm going to ask a question, and Marie, you may chime in on this as well. I think it's super duper practical. There's a business strategy called a Dream 100 that you guys made me think of when you were talking just now, where you pick 100 people who could be extremely influential to your business and you want to get close to them. It's probably one of the most powerful things, but also one of the most abused things out there too, because they just start spamming their Dream 100. So I guess my question for you, JC, is it feels like that the way to someone's heart that's on your Dream 100 is to figure out what's valuable to them. Is there some psychology behind that could help us hack how to think through what's important to somebody?
Yeah, probably about 100 years worth of psychology, right? So earlier, I think, Marie, you mentioned like research and yes, both books have come from a lot of research. A lot of it came from my doctoral work, and it was very academic, right? Which is, you always start with any competency. You always start with the foundation of research that came before. And yes, there is a lot of research that says that, people are, I don't want to call people selfish, but I would say people have a need, and that is their priority is for that need to be met. And like I said earlier, they want to know how much it's going to cost them to meet that need or get the reward they expected. There is a subset of the independence theory or social exchange theory that says that they're also constantly evaluating whether or not you're meeting those expectations and how easy it is to go someplace else, right? In relationships, we see it all the time. Is the number one cause of divorce, which is one or two people in the relationship feel like their needs are not being met, or it's too much to have those needs met, right? It costs too much in time, too much of a mental contribution, too much of money, even effort, right? And so, yes, the best thing we can get out of psychology is that we should be constantly evaluating. And yes, technology can enable that, right? We've got a lot of great technology that can extract insight from our interactions with customers. And yes, I'm a big proponent of design thinking, and I teach design thinking at 4 universities. And that's what I tell my students. Start with what you know. Validate what you know, and then act on what you know, right? If you can act on the insight you're getting and be proactive to meet those expectations and those needs, even better. But that does not keep you away from asking. You should be always asking, am I meeting your need?
Super cool.
The nature of the digital buyer journey today means that earning trust is more important than a sales pitch. Take the mystery out of building a marketing sales funnel for your technology business by downloading our guide at marketingcopilot.com. Marketing Copilot. Find customers, keep customers.
This is the pet peeve part of the show, Chuck. I'm gonna throw the pet peeve out there, and I'm gonna get JC's answer to this. Okay, so pet peeve of mine right now, as we think about relationship building, as we think about that top 100, as we think about wanting to get treated the way we should be treating people and building relationships the way we want to be treated. LinkedIn. Let's talk about LinkedIn for a minute. Great technology tool, powerful product, unbelievable platform. I'm going to, again, pet peeve, and it could be controversial. I think people are abusing it. I think they're abusing the platform. They're not staying true to what it was meant to do, which is to truly connect with people. They're automating connections. They're sending spammy, garbagey email. Give us your thoughts on that. Yes or no?
I agree with you. Yes. And it's a pet peeve of mine as well. So yesterday, and by the way, I love that we're here, but you should know, I just got off a red eye a couple of hours ago. I was in Colorado speaking at a key account management conference. So CamCon 22 was in Boulder day before yesterday and yesterday. And one of the speakers, in fact, he spoke right after I did, was the CEO of a very large HR talent management recruitment company. And you would know the name of the company that is fairly large and recognized. And somebody asked that question, and they said, if I were somebody soliciting business from you, do you ever look at LinkedIn? And his direct, almost immediate answer was, no matter how you reach out to me, but especially LinkedIn, if you're not a genuine human being and you're using tactics like, hey, Wise Marie, right? Things like we do like that, like we put names backward and think that people aren't going to catch that. I was looking at your profile, and your profile matches some of the amazing needs that our companies can provide. Oh my gosh, please shoot me now, right?
Right.
People catch on to that. We are human beings. We are going to, and so the answer to the CEO, the answer the CEO gave, I think is very appropriate about LinkedIn and your questions. He said, if I know you are genuine, and even if you come out and say, look, I don't know you from Adam at all, we have no connection, but I have something of great value that I think you may be interested in, since I do know your company and I've read about your company and I've gone to your website. If you're open to that, I'd love to talk. If not, thank you for your time. He values that more than anything else, right?
Right.
Just don't reach out to him and go, hey, do you know anybody? Who's the person at your company that can connect me with that? It's like, the CEO is not going to give you that. But you're right. We abuse it. I think it's gotten to the point to where people think it's just a big, gigantic room with people holding cocktails that you can just go right up to and say, hey, give me your business. It's like, no, it is a business network, right? And
I do have to say to you, I do like being called Wise Marie. When you switched my name around, it has a nice ring to it. But you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And Chuck, I know you want to weigh in on this conversation.
Oh, I was going to ask JC for something. I think I know the answer because I've heard JC speak quite a few times. One thing that JC does that's really cool is, he's read all this stuff about psychology and CRM and things, but he talks about his family and his relationship with his wife, Shelly, and things like that. And when you were answering that, you made me think of, like, if you were trying to find your future spouse, are you just walking around with a bullhorn and a party, or are you trying to make a personal connection with somebody? And you said something that one time that I've repeated many times. I think it was the difference between CRM and customer experience, and it had to do with the going to dinner with your wife.
Oh, yeah.
I think people
I know what
would
you're talking
love
about.
to hear that story, because people explain these things in such lofty terms, and you have this way of explaining the difference between CRM and CX that I would love for people to hear.
Yeah, so the story that I tell, which by the way is very true. My wife and I, we've been together almost 32 years, married 31. And when I met her, I knew that she was the one for me, right? Mm-hmm. And so the kinds of things that I did to move that relationship along were very experiential, things that we teach in customer experience, which is focus on effectiveness and functionality, giving people what they need, make it easy to get that need, and then make it emotionally connecting, what we call enjoyment. So functionality, accessibility, emotional connection, we know those things, according to Forrester, lead to retention, to enrichment, and they lead to advocacy, right? And so those are the things that I focused on when I went on my first date with my wife. And yes, you could see the little bright stars shining on my teeth when I smile, ding, right? If at the end of our first date, I had turned to Shelly and said, on a scale from 0 to 10, how likely are you to recommend me to others, right? It would have been a ridiculous question to ask. It is a strictly transactional question to ask, but we do it all the time. And that is a different, right? And you have to decide, if you're Amazon, and you are primarily a transactional direct-to-consumer business, then yes, that's the relationship. It is a transactional relationship. Here's my dollar, give me my hammer. But most of us are not in the transactional business or strictly in the transactional business. We are in relational businesses, and you cannot treat a relational business in a transactional way, right? Sadly, and I've seen it a million times, you have as well, I've seen, account managers and salespeople go back and say, oh my gosh, this customer has an amazing net promoter score. But they're about to leave you because the relationship is falling apart, is moving towards deterioration. So we have to stop measuring relational things in transactional ways. And yeah, that's one of my favorite stories to tell, which, by the way, is very true. Yes. And I did not ask her how likely that. Although she does have a twin sister, that would have worked. If I had asked her how likely are you to recommend me to others.
I always say to people, if you make the ask too soon, you're asking somebody to marry you on the first date, and that just doesn't go over. Right?
It doesn't
go over. Yeah. Okay, we're going to move into the Fast Five. These are the Fast Five questions we like to ask our host. Just give us the answer off the top of your head. Favorite tech or business tool you're using today?
So Business Model Canvas is my to-go tool every time. It is a tool that looks at all 9 components of the business to make sure there's equity across both human interaction and business interaction.
Okay.
Who is a company that does marketing fantastically, JC?
Wow, that's a good one. So I would say, it is a company and it is an individual. So I don't know if you've heard of Brené Brown. And Brené Brown talks about being candid and being transparent and being vulnerable. And I love her because not only is she one of my favorite authors, but her marketing machine is incredible, right? She leverages the concept as much as the personality of the leader, and does a really good job of taking the message and formatting it in ways that different audiences can consume it. And I think that that's brilliant. I really have a lot of respect for her and her organization.
Okay, so you might have just answered the third question, which is, what was your most favorite recent read? I don't know if you read Atlas of the Heart, but that was a great book by her. But what was your most favorite recent read?
Yes, I did read Atlas of the Heart. It is one of my favorite, but recently, for a couple of reasons, I think, and I want to say this because I feel it, I believe it, and I feel it from my heart. I think that more of us need to be doing more to support women-owned businesses and women in leadership more than ever before. And not because it is a trend or because it's what everybody's talking about, but because there is some amazing methodology and some amazing work from women leaders like Brené, which, to answer your question, one of them is the amazing Jean Bliss. And that's who I'm reading right now. Jean came out with a book. She has really funny titles to her book. She wrote a book after she wrote Chief Customer Officer 2.0 and 1.0. She wrote a book entitled I Love You More Than My Dog, right? She's got dogs that she loves to death, and she talks about how much she loves the customer. She just came out with a book a couple of years ago entitled, Would You Do That to Your Mother?
Okay.
That's the title.
That is awesome.
And I'm reading it again, and I love it, and I highly recommend it.
Awesome.
Much to talk about on that one. The next one is, what's your favorite sales strategy?
Wow. So, I think this may sound outdated, but I think, the idea of solution selling is still very important today. Back in the days where, we had selling to Vito, selling, solution selling, strategic selling, solution selling is one of the things that really stood out and aligns with some of the things we talked about today, right? People want to know what solution is going to lead them to the value they expect in a way that is equitable. And they are willing sometimes, as you walk through the meeting that need and that solution, sometimes they're willing to pay more to get to that reward. And solution selling has a great approach and methodology for doing that. I still use it today.
Okay.
Thank you.
I love it. Okay. Last question for you. Most important business result you measure your success by?
Yeah, well, it's almost obvious that it's, relationship quality, right? And I talk about it, I write about it, I try to live it. But to me, we learned that with the amazing advancements in technology through the pandemic, and I had to keep bringing back the pandemic, but through the pandemic, we found that customers who felt that they had a relationship with quality with your company were the ones willing to make consensus and stay, even if you were not the cheapest or the fastest or anything else. So I try to measure that, right? And that's what the books are about, right? The 7 elements that measure relationship quality and equity. So I try to measure that, right? If I even with the both of you, right? I've learned a lot from both of you. I think you're both amazing leaders. And I kind of strive to ask the question, what can I do to keep our relationship from deteriorating and start moving it towards quality, right? That's my measure of success.
Awesome. I love it. And I got to say, you're a man after my own heart. There was always a comment that used to get made that when women in business, they would build the relationship first and then they would ask for the business. Men would do the business first and then they'd go golfing or start building the relationship. And I think in the world we're living in today, it has to start with the relationship and it has to start with that value equation, as you said. And I think you've summed it up brilliantly. Just want to let listeners know that we will summarize show notes today. We'll give a reference to a couple of things, including JC's book, a link back there, because I think there's some people who would really like to see it. We'll put the bio and the link to JC so you can follow up with him on this or any other relationship questions you may have. Sounds like he can talk on a whole bunch of aspects there. And
he's pretty smart.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people could get some advice in various fronts on things. So thank you so much for being on the show today. And we'll make sure that there's connections there for everyone. You've been listening to the Common Sense the Common Sense Professional. I'm the marketer. Chuck is the salesperson. We're here to talk about common sense approaches for your business. I'm your co-host, Marie Weiss.
I am Chuck Ingram.
And we want to say to all our listeners, happy sales and marketing.